What's going on, gardeners? Today's video will be a complete guide for transplanting vegetables out into a garden. This video will be extremely detailed and specifically geared towards new gardeners that want to follow along every step of the way. This will contain minimal edits, so no detail will be spared, and you can see the entire process from start to finish.
If you're new to the channel, please subscribe, hit the bell for notifications, and check out my Amazon store and Spreadshop links in the video description for everything I use in my garden and awesome custom apparel and gear.
I try to edit my videos so they are as time efficient as possible. I cut out any vocal flubs I make, I cut out any rambling tangents I may accidentally go on, and I try to cram as much information in as short of a time frame as possible to save your time and get to the point. But one of the downsides of that format is, for newer gardeners, I occasionally get some complaints that my videos move so quickly that they can't follow along. So this video is specifically going to be geared for the newer gardener, where some of my other videos I may move too quickly. I will have minimal edits, except where I have to pick up and move the camera, or if I get some big noise in my yard that totally interrupts the filming process. So this will be like a real-time, live, uncut, plant along with me video. So hopefully this will be highly beneficial to both the newer gardeners out there and anybody that just wants to join me with a live feel, like you're really out planting alongside me in my garden. Please, I would love to hear your feedback in the comments below. Do you like this format? If so, I will do ones like this more frequently. In this video, I will be transplanting these cool season crops that you see in this tray right here out into my fall garden. But the principles in this video hold true for any kind of transplanting at any point in the year. These transplants are about 5 weeks old. I started them under grow lights in my office, and after about 3 weeks, I started slowly acclimating them outdoors to be accustomed to the real sunlight, because grow lights do not have very strong UV, and if you just relocate your transplants out into the full sun after only being exposed to grow lights, they will get burnt. So you need to slowly acclimate them to the evening sun, the early morning sun, and on cloudy days until you can slowly transition them to full sun. So these are ideally what your transplants will look like. When you see a transplant of that size, they are ideal for putting out into your garden. They should form a nice root mass like this. There should be enough roots that hold the root ball together, but also that they haven't become root bound and they are spiraling around and choking the plant out. So that is exactly what we want to see. When your transplants look like that, that is when you want to put them out into your garden. This is the gardening bed that I will be transplanting in. I removed all the old plants in this bed about 2 months ago. I added 3 bags of cow manure compost, and then I put a tarp over the bed for about 2 months to help speed up the breakdown process. And one of the things that you will notice is I am letting the drip irrigation run in my garden bed. I'm doing that because I want to know exactly where the drippers will irrigate the soil. That way I can transplant my plants right up against the drip line. And on all my raised garden beds, I place these hash marks that are 12 inches apart. That way I can decide easily and quickly if I want to space my rows at 12 or 6 inches. So that makes it really easy to do so. If you have wooden raised garden beds like this, I recommend you install those hash marks and you run your drip lines if you use them beforehand, so you know where the water is going to deposit. So now we will begin the transplanting process. I'm going to plant most of the transplants that you see out in this tray right now, and also I have 2 fertilizers with me. The first fertilizer I'm going to use is an all-purpose granular organic fertilizer. Anything around a 555 NPK will do. I know this one says fruit and nut, but this is totally fine to use for vegetables. It has an NPK ratio of 355. That is close enough to a 555. It has everything that the plants will need to grow and get a nice healthy start. I will also be dusting my planting hole with a natural organic bone meal product, because bone meal is rich in phosphorus and calcium, and that is going to help with root development over time, because roots like a lot of phosphorus and calcium. So the first thing I'm going to plant in this raised garden bed is going to be my romaine lettuce. I will have a few rows of these. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to start popping them out of the transplanting tray. And in order to do that, you want to lightly squeeze the bottoms and pull them out one by one. Do not tug very hard, or else you will actually rip the roots apart. And one thing that you will notice is that in my transplants, I do a process called overseeding, where I seed more than one seed per cell. If you only place one seed per cell, you are going to have a lot of cells where nothing comes up, because seeds do not have 100% germination rates. So it's very important that you put multiple seeds in, and then you can just thin them out later. We'll plant them all, and then after about 2 weeks, a clear, strongest seedling will emerge that will be bigger than the rest. Then we can just take a pair of snips and we can just, cut off the weaker one. Like that one's definitely really weak. We can cut that off. That one's very weak. We can cut that off. Now we have our 2 strongest seedlings, and we will decide between the 2 which one survives. So let's pull all of these out of our transplant tray that are ready to be transplanted. Some are a little bit stunted, which is to be expected, because just like people, some seeds just develop faster than others. That's why you'll have some kids in 5th grade that have a full-on mustache, and some people that are freshmen in high school that still don't have a mustache. We all develop at different rates. Seedlings are no different. Now you may be asking yourself, why am I pulling out all of my transplants at once? That is because I find it most easiest to install seedlings in an assembly line fashion, where you lay everything out exactly where you want them to be first, and then you'll go through in a robotic fashion, dig your hole, place your fertilizer, plant the seedling. And this way you can't mess things up, because we are going to take these and we are going to lay them out where we want them. So romaine heads are pretty big, so they probably need something like 8 inches of space per plant. So since I have a 4-foot raised bed, that means I can fit about 6 to 7 heads of romaine. Looks like 6 is going to work out pretty well. I might do 6 in one row and 7 in the other, because who cares? It's one of the benefits of being a gardener. You can do whatever works best for you at the time. Another thing that you can do is possibly separate seedlings if you feel that they are strong enough into 2. I can probably do that with this one, because I have 13 seedlings here. Well, now I just made 14. I pulled that one apart. So let's do 7. Again, this is an iterative process, so it doesn't have to be perfect. Sometimes we just have to figure this out as we go along. And this is what I'm generally doing off camera all the time. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. We'll pull another one apart here. And they should survive okay. So there we go. I will have 14 total heads of romaine. Perfect. Now we will move our tags, so I know and I remember when I'm planting in each row. Obviously romaine is going to be pretty obvious. It's the only lettuce I'm planting out here. But the next thing I'm going to plant, now this is when you have to put your thinking cap on, because things like romaine, these are going to be cleared out of this garden bed in probably about 45 days. They'll have been eaten. But things like your Brussels sprouts, they take 4 to 6 months to grow. Things like your kale, those are biennials, so they can live for 1.5 years, 2 years to complete their life cycle. So keep in mind, whatever you plant your kale in, whatever your bed that you plant the kale in, that space is going to be occupied until the end of next year. It's going to be there for a long time. Whereas in 2 months, I'll have dead space here that I'll have to plant something else in where my romaine was. So this is when you really have to plan out what is going to be planted. So for that reason, I may not want to put my kale in this bed. I think a smart thing to put in this bed, we'll want to make this a bed that we can turn over quickly. So let's do the next row as cauliflower. This is a variety called Snow Crown. It's supposed to make heads very quickly, so it's good in shorter season climates. And here in the southeast, we tend to go from summer to winter pretty quickly. So we don't get the really long drawn out springs and falls like, say, the Pacific Northwest does, where you can grow the later season varieties of broccoli and cauliflower because you get that cool temperate weather for so long. All right, so this is where you don't want to get your row spacing mixed up like I almost did. So this is where the cauliflower is going to go. I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 cauliflowers, and that's probably about where we want to be because they will require more space than your lettuces. So again, we're doing 7 lettuces in the 4-foot space and 6 cauliflowers in the 4-foot space. Let's make sure that's in focus. Okay, that looks pretty good. Then the next thing that we will do is broccoli. The broccoli seedlings, the transplants, are not as far along as the cauliflowers are. So I have to be very careful when pulling them out so I don't accidentally harm them. Okay. That's a tricky one. Remember, just be slow and gentle. There's no big reason to rush, especially this time of year in the fall. It's beautiful weather. I still have about another 45 minutes to an hour's worth of sunlight to plant this, so I should not have to rush. Time is on my side. Okay. So, I think this is a really good start. This will be 2 rows of lettuce, a row of cauliflower, and a row of broccoli. So now I want to start digging the planting holes. And you'll notice that I don't have any shovels, I don't have any gloves on. I'm going to use my bare hands here because you get great tactile feedback when you use your bare hands. And because you are only planting this little tiny plug right here, you don't need a shovel like you have some big 8-week-old tomato transplant where you're going to need to dig. So I recommend the bare-handed planting method. And also there's just something primal and enjoyable about getting your hands dirty. Now I'm going to work from the center of the raised garden bed back. Because if I started here, I'm going to be crushing my seedlings as I move forward. So I'm literally just going to take my hand and make a little pit and then put the seedling in the pit. Whew. Opening that bag of organic fertilizer stinks. There is quite the healthy manure content in this brand of fertilizer, in this Job's, I have to say. Oof. And remember, we are planting this along the drip line. Now, because these beds have been sitting for so long, I feel like there's a little bit of undermining under here, since I just placed compost on top and kind of ignored them for a few months. So you want to make sure that you don't have any holes down there. Look, I'm already going against my own advice. I'm starting to. I started on this side and I'm planting forward. So now I'm trying not to crush my plants. See, you don't want to do that. Okay. We want to start about here, right where the wet spot from the drip line is. And be as evenly spaced as possible, but again, there's no need to pull a tape measure or anything like that. This does not have to be perfect. You know, this is gardening, not surgery. In fact, I don't even know how accurate surgeons are. Okay, so we have one more row here. Remember to follow my own advice and start from the center and work your way down. Cool. All right, now we have all of our plants in. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a handful of the all-purpose fertilizer and I'm going to drop about a tablespoon's worth into each hole. So I got, in my rather small hands, one handful is enough for about 4 seedlings. Your mileage may vary. Okay. So that looks good. Then I will take the bone meal and I will dust the root balls with the bone meal. And try really hard not to breathe this in because it's a very, very fine powder. See, the wind is blowing away that direction. That's fortuitous. I didn't plan for that. It's just working out for me, luckily, for this video. But this stuff is super powdered. It's like breathing in flour. You don't want to breathe that in. It's probably not good for your lungs. Okay, now we have the all-purpose fertilizer and the bone meal down. We are going to start backfilling our transplants. And to do that, we are literally just going to press the soil down around it just to hand tightness, you know, just tamp it down, press it down, make sure that all of the air holes are pressed out. But don't push it so hard that you squash the roots and you make it really hard for the plants to grow, because remember, these are young, fragile roots, so you don't want the roots to have to traverse really hard soil. That is the greatest benefit to gardening in raised beds, because the soil tends to be so loose and light and loamy. So when you have nice, loose, light, loamy soil like this that is well draining, it is very easy for the roots to grab hold quickly, as opposed to a harder soil where the roots will struggle to grab hold, and that will actually set your plants behind schedule. So again, raised gardening beds are awesome for so many reasons, and helping the transplants grab a hold sooner is one of those reasons. Okay, so they are all in. Now I have to work on these plants on this side that I did not get in yet. Let me just check my camera angles. Okay, cool. Let's start over here. Dig out the holes the same way that we did before, just using our fingertips. Get them nice and dirty. And then work our way down the line. And you see, I'm doing a bad thing here. I'm working forward, so I'm leaning over the seedlings. I really should have started over there. But the reason why I did this was I don't know if I'm going to be able to reach that far, and I may have to move the camera. So hopefully I won't have to. Go. Running out of reach. Now these rows aren't going to be perfectly straight, and honestly, if I were making edits to this video, I would probably stop and make things a little bit straighter, but I don't want to do that because I specifically want to show you that gardening doesn't have to be perfect. You know, this isn't a show garden. I don't have people doing the gardening for me. I do this because I love doing it. It's all about the process and the enjoyment. So we just put in the organic fertilizer. Now we're going to put in the bone meal just like before. Luckily the wind stopped, so it's not blowing the bone meal right in my face. Good timing. And we'll do the same thing as before. We will tamp them down. Yes, I didn't plant that row of broccoli. I will do that after I tamp all this down. Okay, make sure that we press out any air gaps along the roots, because the roots will not be able to breathe if there are gaps in the soil. But again, we can't push things down so hard that we squish the roots and they struggle to grow, or we straight up damage the roots. You don't want to do that either. Okay, that looks beautiful. Okay, now we're going to plant these last 3 seedlings right here. One, last one will go there. Sometimes it's easier to bookend your seedlings, do the last one and the middle one, and then you just pick the gap in the center for the other one. So, organic fertilizer and bone meal. All right. Okay. So that right there completes the planting of 14 heads of romaine, 6 heads of cauliflower, and 6 heads of broccoli. Now I need to figure out what I want to plant in the rest of these raised beds. I have mustard greens, red cabbage, green cabbage, Brussels sprouts, and kale. So we will see, oh, and collards. We will see how this all shakes out. I might be able to fit everything in this bed. I may decide to not plant the biennials in this bed. But what I do have to do is make my first edit. I have to pick up the camera and move it. So we'll be right back. Okay, now the camera has been reset and I've thought about what I'm going to plant next in my raised bed. Now all of the romaine, the cauliflower, and the broccoli will probably be done by Christmas. So I will be able to reclaim this half of the raised bed for the new year. Now I think in everything that I have growing in this tray, the next 2 things to mature will probably be the red and the green cabbages. So that is going to be the next thing that I will plant in my raised garden bed. So usually the green cabbages are a little bit ahead of the reds. So let's pull out our green cabbages. See, this one does not want to come out. So sometimes when they're stuck, instead of just yanking them, which will tear them, you have to turn it upside down and just let them fall out with gravity assistance. Now this one I have a cell where nothing germinated, unfortunately. However, cabbages generally take up more space because the heads can get quite large. So it's not necessarily a bad thing to give your cabbage a little bit more room to sprawl. However, it doesn't mean I'm not going to check these over to see if I can separate some seedlings. But honestly, none of them really look like they're in good enough shape for separation. So we will just have a row of 5 cabbages. 3, 4, and 5. Now let's check out our reds and see what we are looking at. One, 2. Come on, buddy. Come on out of there. You can do it. 3. Again, same problem. We have one cell where no cabbage germinated, even though I put 2 to 3 seeds in every cell. But I don't grow a lot of cabbage, and a lot of my cabbage seed are several years old. So this is probably 3-year-old seed. That is probably why nothing germinated, even though I overseeded. So that explains it. It's one of the downsides of using older seed. So there is our cabbage right there. And now we're going to do a piece of metal in there. Now we're going to do the same exact thing as before. We're going to start in the middle, dig a hole for our cabbage, place the seedling at the proper depth. There's a little bit of undermining in the dirt right here, so I have to make sure that there are no gaps in the soil. Put that cabbage transplant right in there. Put another one right there. Okay. Now, some of the soil is so light and loamy and fluffy that it just develops air pockets in it. And that is one of the downsides of having really light, loamy soil. So you always have to feel around for them. I mean, it's nice looking soil, right? It is nice, but it takes years to get this way. Remember, I'm gardening on Carolina sand, so this is why I grow in raised beds. Things would not grow well in the native soil here. It's basically only good for growing weeds, as I often say. Okay. Bone meal. Doesn't matter if you put your bone meal first or your organic all-purpose fertilizer first. Doesn't matter. As long as you do them both. All right. Now we tamp everything down. These are the problems that you run into when you start with the plants closest to you and then work your way out. You have to really stretch to make sure you don't damage anything. Okay. So that does the cabbages that are closest to me. Now I need to think about what's going next. Definitely not the kales, because they take the longest. So they will be left for the absolute end. So I'm basically stuck between collards, Brussels sprouts, and mustard greens. because Brussels sprouts are the closest genetically to cabbage. I will plant them next. And I also think that they will finish before the mustard greens. The mustard greens will grow all the way until they bolt in probably May here. So wherever I put the mustard greens, they're going to be hanging out, saying hi for me to me for a very long time. So keep that in mind. Another thing I could do is I could choose to plant nothing else in this bed after this and start another planting of cabbage or broccoli to succession plant behind this. So that's another strategy that you could use if you so choose to. So there's no kind of formula that says you have to plant all the same things in a bed. You can plant whatever you want in this bed as long as they aren't planted in such a way that something tall is going to be planting in front of the sun and it's going to shade out the weaker things, the smaller things behind it, because remember, the sun is very weak and days are very short this time of year. So it is really important that you orient things so they get the maximum amount of solar duration. Don't plant things in such a way that things are growing in shade or dappled light in the winter. That could be a good strategy for the summer, but not for the winter. Things grow slowly enough this time of year. So I have 6 Brussels sprouts plants. These are going to get planted in a nice neat row. But it doesn't have to be nice and neat. That's just a choice I'm making. So there goes the all-purpose fertilizer. There goes the bone meal. And I'm kind of breaking my assembly line fashion stride here because I'm trying to figure out how I want to orient this raised bed. I didn't give this a lot of thought beforehand, kind of on purpose, because I wanted to make these decisions live and in real time with all of you. So there was thought behind that. So, make sure I'm still on camera. Yes, now I'm going to do the same thing over here with the other cabbages and Brussels sprouts. Dig my holes. Stick the plants in. Bone meal, all purpose, all purpose. All right. Dig a hole, dig a hole. Place the plant, place the plant. Fertilizer, fertilizer. Bone meal, bone meal. Backfill, tamp down. And backfill and tamp down. One thing that I am noticing is that some of these cabbages have gotten a little bit spindly, maybe from the wind blowing them around. So it's entirely possible that some of these cabbages are not going to take, and I may have to replace them with other seedlings, unfortunately. So I have a feeling that about 5 to 10% of these plants may not make it. So one of the things you may want to consider is to grow additional transplants. I also have another tray of transplants up in my office going that are about 2 to 3 weeks behind these, and I do that on purpose so I can stagger my harvests because I don't want everything maturing at the same time, and it also gives me some backup seedlings in case invariably when one of these fails, I'll be able to pop in another one. And I don't care how good of a gardener you are or how long you've been doing it, you are going to have some seedlings that don't take. So don't for a second there think that, you know, YouTube gardeners or professional gardeners see 100% success transplanting things. That's just not the way things work. The wind beats stuff up, insects come and they snip things off. You can't be out here at all times taking care of all conditions. And sometimes some seedlings are just genetically weak and they don't cut it for whatever reason. So any year you're going to have some stuff that fails. And that's totally okay. That is totally normal. Do not feel bad if you have plants fail on you. That isn't you. There's nothing wrong with you. That is all of us. That is gardening. Now, the last thing I'm going to plant in this bed, I can choose between lacinato kale, curly kale, mustard greens, and collards. And I have 2 more rows to plant out. So I think I'm going to go with my mustard greens, which I just love. And maybe collards. See, the problem with growing collards or kale, even mustard greens in this bed, is that they're going to be here all winter. So that means, see, this is the problem with planting. That means that all the bed is going to get turned over except for this piece right here, and this stuff is going to be growing until May or June when they flower and bolt and go to seed on me. So that's one of the challenges when you're a gardener. Things never time themselves out to a point where you get 100% of your bed back at the same time, it seems. So as they say, it is what it is. I'll just deal with it. It's better than the alternative, which is to not have food. So, you know, it's a good problem to have. Oh, your plants are too productive. They survive all year and keep feeding you. Oh, poor you. Life is so difficult for you to have all that food, right? So, it's a blessing and a curse. But what isn't? Okay. And the last things that you're seeing in this tray right here, it's actually lettuce leaf basil. I wanted to see if I could grow some more basil plants at the last minute to get maybe a last minute harvest before the season ends. And I should be able to, but I might put a couple in pots. I haven't quite decided yet. That's a story for another day. So let's keep putting, let's see, I have 1, 2, 3, 4, I have 5 collard greens that germinated. I'm short 1, but again, I have a whole nother tray of them upstairs. Get that worm out of there. That looked like a worm you don't want in your garden bed. More a cut style worm. Okay, 1, 2, 3. And again, we are planting everything along this beautiful, glorious drip line. So I'm going to have to hand water my garden bed with a watering wand probably for the first week until these seedlings really grab a hold. Just because drip line may not give you 100% penetration where you want it to be. But after that, I am not going to have to, the roots are going to extend enough throughout the area that I'm not going to have to do that. And I'll just be able to turn on the drip irrigation and I am done. Get you a little bit better of a camera angle here. See, this is one of the problems with the no edit format. The camera angles are not as great as if you're constantly resetting the camera. But hopefully it's adequate enough that you can get a really good picture of what we're doing right here. Okay. Those are the collards. You know, I'm looking at where I planted my collards, and I have to say, I'm actually going to push these back a little bit. They are too close to the mustard greens. And I also dug the wrong number of holes for my mustard greens. Ugh. There should be 1, 2, 3, right on the edge of the drip line. Come on. This is where the soil is dry on the edge of the drip line, so it doesn't want to stay put right. Okay, so let's take this drip line, take the stakes out, fill in the holes a little bit, and I'll pull it back a little bit because I want more space for my collard greens to make nice big heads. So collard greens do need a little bit of room to grow. They're much larger than a lot of your brassicas. They can get pretty sizable. If you've ever gone to the grocery store and gotten yourself a head of collard greens, you know they can get pretty massive, like a huge head of cabbage, except with more flavor. And that's coming from a guy that loves cabbage. All right, and one more collard. Try to get it as close to that drip line as possible. And this is why I'm going to have to hand water the first couple of days, because I feel like the drip line may be too far off for some of them. But what you don't want to do probably is both run the drip line and hand water, because if you do that, you could risk drowning them. Because remember, the roots at this stage are not strong. They can't take a whole lot of water. You could drown them. So don't do your transplanting if there is really like days of heavy rain in the forecast. It's fine if there's going to be a rain shower. That actually helps your case if you get a little bit of rain. But lots of rain, you can drown your plants. So if you have, days of rain scheduled ahead of you, and if it's like significant rain, not a very light Seattle drizzle, you may want to hold off until you get a drier pattern. A really good time to transplant is actually during overcast weather, because sun actually causes a lot of stress for the plants. If you've noticed, it's getting dark right now. It's 5:30. So I started this process once the sun got below the tree line, because I want these plants to settle in and have the maximum amount of time to adjust before they have to face full sun. And we have a very sunny and warm forecast. I think tomorrow is 83 degrees and sunny. So I don't want that sun pounding on them until they get as much time to sit still and process their new home as possible. Now again, it's not going to hurt the plants because they'll have almost 24 hours to settle in. They'll be fine, but I will have to water these tomorrow with these warm, dry conditions. And just like that, our bed is completely planted out. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 rows of plants. So they're all spaced exactly 1 foot. So this is going to be our first true fall gardening, 100% dedicated fall gardening bed of the fall and winter. Now here's an optional step, but I really do think it helps the transplants grab a hold. I have found that when I water the transplants in with Alaska fish fertilizer, this stuff, it's just jam-packed with nutrients. All the nutrients that you'd find in fermented, pulverized, ground-up fish. It has a good amount of nitrogen, 511 NPK, 5% nitrogen. I have found that by taking your watering cans and adding about 2 to 3 tablespoons per gallon and then watering the plants in, that really helps them avoid transplant shock and grab a hold earlier. So these are 1.5 gallon watering cans. I'm going to put in about 3 tablespoons of fish fertilizer. It doesn't have to be perfect, just get it close. And then I'm going to add rain from my rain barrels. You don't have to use rain from rain barrels, but just make sure, hear that? Water it in, mix it very, very well. This is like a fish paste, so it has to be blended as well as you possibly can, evenly distributed throughout the water. I think I'll actually speed this process up because you don't need to see all of this in that great of detail. I'll try and save you a little bit of time. Now that this has been fully mixed, I'm going to show you how to apply it. But before we apply any of that water-soluble fertilizer that we mixed in our watering cans, we have to actually water in the plants with plain water first. And the reason why we have to do this is twofold. Number one, this soil has been covered for quite a long period of time, so part of it is hydrophobic, meaning the top is kind of dried out, so it's not ready to immediately accept water, and we want to wet it down so the soil has time to slowly absorb the water overnight and become more and more hydrophilic and to moisten more easily. But the biggest reason why is what I explained to you earlier in the video. These plants are, some of the soil is a little bit undermined underneath, and also when you naturally backfill your soil by hand, you're not going to have perfect compaction. So there is going to be some air gaps around the roots of all of these plants. So we need to soak them down really well, because the water is going to cause the soil to compact fully around each of the individual plants. So this is going to eliminate those air gaps, and you're not going to have any of your plants fail on you because there's big gaps of air underneath the soil. So we want to wet them down pretty substantially at this stage right here. And obviously we don't want to do this with fertilizer, because not only would it cost us an insane amount of money to do that, but we would be applying so much fertilizer it would probably burn up and kill the plants. So we just want to use plain old water for this. So I'm going to take this watering wand and I'm just lightly going to go over the rows, and I'm going to do the rows one at a time in a back and forth motion. That way I'm able to wait for the soil to fully absorb that water back in. So that's why I'm going all the way to, I'm starting at the left and I'm going all the way to the right, over and over and over again. So I'm going to give this, I don't know, 5 or 6 passes. It looks like everything is kind of absorbing very well into this soil, and it doesn't look like that there's a lot of voids around the individual plants. So after this pass, I think I'm going to call it quits. But I do have a little bit of a void right here in the raised garden bed, so I'm going to fill that in. There we go. The end rows of your raised garden beds are usually the most problematic, because the corners will wash out when you get heavy rain. So I think that is enough water right there. So now that the water has fully absorbed, I ended here. So I will start applying the fertilizer here, and I just want to lightly run over the rows with the fish emulsion infused fertilizer. We're not going to give them a ton, just enough to give them a little bit of nitrogen and trace micronutrients to help with the transplanting process. So a second or two per plant should be really all that they need. And it's probably going to take about 1.5 watering cans to do this entire bed. And then whatever's left in that other watering can, I'll apply it to other plants that are actively growing in my garden. Like maybe this eggplant right behind me or something like that. Anything that needs to be greened up a little bit. Look at that, I almost did the entire raised garden bed with one watering can. I just have to get these last 3 plants, 1, 2, 3, gently. And then I will reserve the last little more than a gallon in here for other things inside my garden. And that is it. Everything has been planted, fertilized, watered in, and fertilized again. That is how you transplant vegetables out into your vegetable garden. So everybody, I really hope you enjoyed this video. If you enjoyed this new format and you want to see me make longer form, more detailed videos like these with less edits, please leave a comment down in the video description and let me know. I make these videos for you, so if you don't provide your feedback, then I don't really know which direction to go. So I value your feedback highly, and if you really like this, let me know so I know to make more videos like these. Similarly, if you thought that this video was way too long and drawn out and too wordy and unnecessary and it needs more edits than this, also, please let me know down in the video description. I need to fine-tune what I'm doing, so if you give me feedback on both the positive spectrum and the negative spectrum, well, I need to take both of those types of feedback and create some kind of medium that helps as many people as possible, because that is my goal with these videos. Ultimately, at the end of the day, I just want to help as many people garden as possible. So everybody, if you did like this video, please make sure to hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and ring the notification bell so you're notified when I release more videos like these. If you're curious about any of the products that I use in real life in my garden, everything I use is linked down in the video description in my Amazon storefront link. So expand the video description, click on the Amazon link, you'll see everything I use in real life. And while you're down there, please check out my spread shop for custom merch if you want to support the channel. Thank you all so much for watching, and I hope to see all of you again on the next video. Oh boy, Dale is gonna love this. This is a tilapia fillet with carrots and kale from the garden and an egg with a little tiny pinch of sea salt. I think my special boy is getting hungry. Oh boy, this is gonna be so good. Come on, Dale, come. Oh, look at him go. Man, this may be a record for the fastest that Dale has ever just chomped down. This is why you really need to get one of these slow feeder bowls to keep him from choking. And big-necked, big-chested beast dogs like Dale, they get prone to bloat and things like that, which can be fatal. So, Dale, let's slow down a little bit. Dale, come on, slow down. Slow down, buddy. You're eating too fast. Slow down for us. We love you very much, boy.